Hello, game devs. In this video, we're going to be talking about how to texture a Probuilder object. There's a couple things that we're going to want to grab for today. The first is I found this author Xmorg. You can get whatever textures you want, but I'm going to be using his texture set. They're very straightforward, hand-drawn stuff. These are textures are images that tile, and in other words, they will be able to extend forever if you place them next to each other. And generally, we create them as kind of the first coding of a file of a program of a 3D model. If you look back to old video games, all of the textures that we have on those characters are just the texture, the albedo, which is what they call it in Unity. So if you take a look at like old Halo games, it's just that one texture. If you compare that with really, even at the time, like in the 90s, right? Like if you take Toy Story had far more textures, far more materials, I should say, that utilized different textures to create better effects. So like if you take a look at the Incredibles, for instance, like they do have textures in there, but they're about 100 or some odd materials per character. It takes forever to render. So we're usually only working with 2 or 3 or 5, depending on what platform we're on. This is kind of like the painted on stuff. So we're just going to grab this set of artwork. It's very cartoony, very straightforward. The other thing that we're going to go to do is grab an asset from the asset store. So the one that I have grabbed is Baker's House by Evgenia. Any kind of really low poly thing will do. This one was just part of the low poly township set. And we're going to just open this up and mess around with it. And I'm going to ask you to texture this house. So I won't be doing it in front of you too much, but I'll show you the steps in order to get it ready for texturing, because you're going to texture the house and then you're going to texture the barrel utilizing not Evgenia's textures, but someone else. So download this pack, download that object, and then once you're ready, we're going to go into our scene view. And as you can see, if you were following along with the white box video, this looks a little bit different. I have finished color vertexing everything because we can select from that way. See this select by colors bit. So we're going to be able to select from there, and I'm just going to quickly show you the tools to texture the things right here, and then hopefully you'll be able to apply that to your assignment. All right, so the first thing I need to do is I have a materials folder, but I do not have a textures folder. So I want to create a new folder, _textures. And textures are where pictures go. And then I'm going to, not that target, but I'm going to copy all of my textures in. And I might have to show this in Explorer. And I don't have to work in this interface, by the way, if I just paste stuff inside of these folders once they load. See, now we're going to import all of those. And so they're accessible in Unity. So you can go back and forth. Between software and the file browser. So we have all these textures now. If we take a look, let's look at the inspector. Going to move the shape tool away. If we take a look at the inspector, each texture here has some default inputs. We're not going to change anything here for now, although you would if you were making a 2D game specifically. But this is just the color. It's got RGB and it's also got alpha typically. So the transparency of each thing. It looks like we've got some bark. We've got canvas. We've got plaster. Got plaster with the walls. We've got some grass. So one of the nice things about Unity is that you can quickly just drag stuff out and just drop it on. And then it tiles. And look at that. We have ourselves a grass texture. Now, if you zoom in, it kind of looks, I mean, it's a little messy or whatever, but, it looks all right. So let's open up in our Probuilder window the material editor. And one of the things that we'll notice is that when I dragged this crosshatch grass texture onto this, it created a materials folder because we were being a little lazy and letting it do that for us. And it created this crosshatch grass texture material. So the material, and I'm going to just dock the inspector as well because we're going to need that. So the material, as you can see, has an albedo, and that albedo is that green texture. If I wanted to, I could select a different, and now it's dirt, and we could switch it out. But the picture, the texture, doesn't matter. All right, so I'm going to leave this here for now, but later on we're going to migrate this material out into the materials folder, just because I'm going to be auto-generating a couple of them. But the other thing we're going to see here is the material browsers, the material editor. So we actually have some hot buttons if we want to. The Probuilder default is Alt-1. I'm going to just drag this ground crosshatch into Alt-2. So now anything I do, if I select this, I hit Alt-2. There you go. The whole thing is green. Not exactly very beautiful, but maybe it's like a hedge or a wall or something like that. So we can do something else. We can select by colors. That can be very helpful. So if we have current selection, let's grab that and then current selection. Select by vertex color. Now we have selected all of the yellow bit, and we could apply that cross hatching if we wanted to. But that doesn't necessarily look that great. So let's create another texture. Let's see. Gray brick wall, gray stone. And we can do this a couple different ways. I'm a little lazy. I like the computer to do things for me if I can. So I'm just going to drag this right onto an object so that it will auto-generate me, and I'm just going to keep using this object over and over again. In fact, why don't we just generate a couple other things? So we have that gray brick. We've got plaster 3, canvas, bark base. Let's see, what else do we have here? Dirty tile. Maybe the tile floor. There's a dirty tile. Oh, that doesn't tile well at all. So, one of the things we can also see is, sometimes they say it tiles, but it does not. And what I mean by tiling is that we can kind of see the edge here, can't we? There are ways to fix this, and we'll go over them as well. This kind of tiling is really irritating. So this is a really ugly one. I probably won't use this when I end up doing what I need to do. And then gray brick wall. That one looks pretty good. M stone. There we go. That looks all right too. So, we've generated a couple different things. Now let's just try to apply them. We'll grab our materials. We'll start dragging this into, oh, I don't like the dirty one. Plaster. Gray brick wall. And, if I was spending more time with this, I would probably rename these, make sure that they're all evenly, that they're named according to what I want to do. So why don't I do that now? Mat, wall, or, M wall, plaster, 01. M for material, just brick. Brick 02. M wall, or M wall, stone 01. floor, or M ground, dirt, or grass, 0, 1. M wall, plaster, 0, 2. And like I said, I'm gonna get rid of this dirty tile. It looks awful for tiling purposes. Anyway, I'm sure it's good on its own. So we've got that M1. Yeah, let's think about materials, right? So we've got a couple materials. How do we get them on this? So let's take a look at the UV editor. The UV editor is the same thing we might come across in any sort of 3D modeling program. And it's the way that we look at a model, and you can kind of conceptualize it as taking all of the polygons and laying them out flat so that we can use artwork to lay everything out together. And this looks kind of a mess right now, but we're going to clean it up a little bit, or we're going to organize it. And we can do that pretty easily through this interface. So as you can see, we have everything in the yellow selected. Each polygon is represented in here somehow. Selecting it here, you can see. So I'm going to try to grab this entire face, and I just want to move it around in here so that I could apply a material to it separately. But before we do that, let's just go through all these buttons here or what they do. I'm going to maximize this so that we, not maximize, oh boy. I'm going to greatly increase the size of this, and let's take a look at the UV editor. So the UV editor, we've got the hand view tool. You can move around the scene. The move, rotate, and scale tool is all still here. And then we've also got our object selection as well, what kind of selections we're making. So how are we moving things around in the scene? So we can go to vertex selection and move things around by vertex, edges, or faces. We've also got this lock the scene hand tools to UV manipulation mode. This allows you to move UV coordinates directly on your 3D object. So what are UV coordinates? Basically, this UV editor matches up artwork for whatever it is the texture has. And right now everything is using the same artwork, that prototype Probuilder thing. But let's say I wanted to just grab everything on this face. So we can change the scale and size of everything. And I'm going to use the Probuilder texture for a second to show you what I mean. But we can mess around with different settings. So we could change the rotation. Look at that. We could change what rotation the texture is. We can offset it. And since it's a grid, it doesn't really look different, but we could see how we could match stuff up, right? So what if our texture looks like this, right? Maybe we want this, maybe we don't. Maybe this is good for showing that there's a ceiling here, but maybe we're like, ugh, look at this. It doesn't line up properly. And this is something that as a game developer, I get dinged on from my boss all the time. I want to, oh, whoops, I moved it up there. I wanted to see if I could move this, up or down. So I could use the moving controls, and we have the whole face selected right now, which is why it's happening right there. But we can grab everything together and move it around if we would want to. But maybe we want it to be double the size, right? Well, we can hit scale. And now we can change the size of how big it is. And as you can see, it's smaller in here, but bigger in there. That's just how it works. It's, inverted selection. So we could change the scale. These are all tools for you to use. You could flip it around, which won't really do much for this prototype, but you could, understand how it might be helpful if there's a reverse facing thing. You can also group selected faces. So I'm going to select all these faces. I'm going to hit, oh, whoops. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all these faces here. And I'm just going to group them by side for now. Or I'm going to group this one by side because you can see it's kind of separate. I'd like to stick them all together. So I'm going to group selected faces. And now they move as one. Oops, I've lost the move. Now they'll move as one. Also, if I left click and unclick that and then I move this around, it'll move the whole thing. So grouping selected faces is very helpful. But you know, maybe we want to actually break that up, and you know, we'll move this out over here. Maybe we want to break it up. So break selected group. Now I can move each piece independently. So it depends on what you want. I generally edit in, you know, I'll use the scene view and edit as well as I'm going along. But let's go back to this tool. This is really fun. Lock the scene view handles. So you could also hit this button, and then you can manipulate the texture in the scene view, which is really nice and helpful if you are trying to finagle something specific. Yeah, so that's the tools there. So let's apply some textures. I'm going to take the UV tool bit off. I'm going to select, and I'm going to select vertex colors because I just want to apply everything. Oops. Select by colors, and then select vertex color by current selection. Now I've got all the yellow selected because I was diligent in coloring everything. And I'm just going to apply the M Plaster 2 material. So I'm going to do that by using Alts, let's see, Alts 4. And oh boy, look at that. It is plaster, but it's not exactly the way I want. You know, like it should be just one big square probably on these sides. So let's scale up that texture greatly. So tiling, we can just use this very quickly to scale everything. There we go. That looks a little bit better. Maybe 0.25. Oops. And I'm just going to grab all these pieces and move them out. This scales infinitely. If you see, this is the actual art image right here, that box. But it goes on infinite and infinite. So this space is as big as you need it to be, which is very helpful. And because this is grouped, it's very easy for me to just move it around. And, you know, maybe like here and, you know, and I'm going to edit in UV mode here. I just want to move it up so that I get this beam here. And then I'm just going to texture this bottom something else. But this actually looks like a good size for most of my wall. I'm going to just maneuver the rest. And look at this. This is all irritating, right? I have to move this all one at a time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch it together. So first I'll select the main group here. And then I'm going to hit Control. I'm going to select the bottom face there. I'm going to hold down Control and click. And then as you can see, it automatically popped to the next side, to the spot right next to it. I'm going to click again. And this all looks messed up right now, but that's okay. Click again. And that's everything. So I'm going to do that one more time. This time, though, I'm going to stitch upwards so that I just get everything on the column together. So I'm going to left click, hold down Control, stitch up, and see it snaps the right face to the right spot. So it's just really fast and easy way for me to organize my, my box. Holding down Control and clicking. Holding down Control and clicking. Look at that. Bam. All right. Now it's still yellow, if you haven't noticed, which is fine. I'll just keep it for yellow. But we could turn that back to white, and then it would change the nature of it. But all right. So on this floor here, I'm going to make like a basement level. I'm I'm going to make like a basement level. I'd really like to see maybe some stone down there. And one of the things that we're going to do is just drag that in, and you can see it snaps in here. Now, if you have object mode selected inside the UV editor and you drag your stone in, it's going to texture everything no matter what. So a little tiny button, just make sure that you set it to faces or whatever you're working on. And then you can just say Alt, let's see, what was it? Alt 7 in this case, Alt 7. And now we have ourselves a little like, stone bricky thing. And then if I wanted to, I could also select by material. And now I can just select everything that's by that material. And then maybe I want to change the UV colors of that to be more like gray, so it's less yellow. There we go. So now we have ourselves a house that's set apart a little bit more. Our interior is still really weird. Also, it looks like this column doesn't really line up. So I want to do even more editing in terms of, let's close this materials editor. It would be the UV. I want, at least for the door frame, I want to line that up better. There we go. Look at that. So that looks more natural. It's not natural, but it looks more natural and lined up. And then there's a column on the side here. A column on the side over here. And it wraps around. So maybe we also want this column to kind of meet on the side. Maybe this one specifically, we're going to, just zoom out a little bit, make it just flush with everything. There we go. Might be a small detail, but it looks a little bit better now. All right, so we've got the roof, right? Look at this roof. You notice how it doesn't meet its edges? So these are our textures. It looks like they're all separate right now. So what we need to do is we need to figure out how to apply a texture evenly to it. So why don't we try to convert to manual and then say planar. So planar means flat. And because it knew what was going on and which direction flat was, it automatically lined everything up. This is very easy now to then modify. So if we hit Alt 4, 3, 2, let's see. Yeah, there's some tiles. Maybe this isn't the right roof to have a tile from this direction. So maybe we need to make this more of a pitched roof from this same angle all the time. We'll mess around with that a little bit later. So instead of, changing the artwork, I'm just going to rotate it because like this doesn't look really good. The tile goes right across. It should look more like shingles. Even though these are bricks, technically. If I wanted to, I could grab these and rotate those. Oops, I need to unbreak them. And then I could rotate them. Also, if you're having trouble rotating, hold down Control and it'll snap to a degree. But yeah, that at least lines them up so that they are horizontal, but it looks like those lines are not there. And yeah, this is kind of some of the nitty gritty kind of textures. And this is where that tool comes in handy. So we're gonna isolate this, grab that, and then move it along the texture. Maybe like that. Like right there. So at least the bricks are lined up when they wrap around. Maybe I might even try to do a little more work moving it back and forth, but this isn't the right texture for a ceiling, but it's not going to be seen up close. No one's going to care. Yeah. So, we can also do some of the interior as well. I think that is pretty straightforward as far as the UV and material editor. Let's see if we want to make sure that we go over everything. Select material, grow selection. Oh yeah. So if you select an object and you just want to grab the faces, you can use grow selection. This is also Alt G. Right now my grow selection is set so that its angle is 15 degrees. It'll grow, meaning every time I hit the button, and I'll show you here in this one. So if you hit Alt-G, it can grow to everything until there's an angle that's greater than 15 degrees. But you can also not restrict that. So if we have this and don't restrict it to angle, and hit grow, then it just selects the things near it, and also the file, the selection over here, that anything that touches it, and then from there it'll grow again. Alt-G, 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 Alt-G. So depending on whether or not you like this option, this is a very helpful option for selection. I keep mine restricted to angle. So the other thing you may notice is that normals. So a normal, you don't really need to know too much about it, but basically it's the direction which the computer should render, in which direction should the computer render graphics. So right now the normal, and you can tell the normal is facing upwards because the arrow is facing upwards, but also we can see it. So if we hit flip normal on everything, undo. So if we hit flip face normal, it will reverse the direction of the way it's looking. So if I click off, it looks like it's looking through the floor, but now as I can see, the floor is facing the other direction. So that's not super useful to us, but it is something that if you run into trouble and you're moving polygons around, you may run into an error here or there. All right. So yeah, I think that is about it. Let's fly over to a little area here and bring in the Baker house. Okay. So go to the Baker house, and I don't want you to use their material really, but what I want you to do is go into models and select model. And, we could take a look at the material if we want to. So usually usually in video games, what we do is we pack a texture. So this is what a professional artist's texture usually looks like. There is, it's 512 by 512, and all the pieces and components are shoved together, and then we kind of do what we're doing here, but in a video game context. So you could use this if you would like. You could also utilize someone else. So this is going to be a lot of unwrapping. I'm not really looking for you to do this much work in unwrapping, but if you wanted to go for it, that's fine. Or if you wanted to sample pieces of this and do, a really expert job, feel free. But what I want you to do is texture the object in Probuilder. So, and here's the barrel texture as well. So what you're going to do is go to models and drag in Baker house and drag in barrel. Okay. Well, it looks like the barrel has a material on it already. I don't want that material. There you go. Just the mesh. Oh well. I'll delete it. So this has the material on it. It'll go away in a second when we do this step. So you're going to select your house, and you can make it whatever scale you want, but it's the one that is untextured. So just the model, not the prefab. And what I want you to do is once it's in object mode, and I'll bring this over here too so we can kind of see it or walk around it in a second. So what I want you to do, Probuilder has some really cool thing called Probuilderize. So let's say you had a 3D model and you just want to mess around with it, or someone else's. You can hit Probuilderize, and look at that. Now we can edit the geometry by hand. So it can get really sticky and dangerous if you're not sure what you're doing. But your job is going to be to texture this house with original textures that you downloaded. The recommended website is opengameart.org. There's a bunch of textures here. I'm not looking for anything specifically unique, but it should be tileable. I mentioned that there were seams in that one. So whatever you're doing should be tileable. And you need to have a unique roof, a unique wall, a unique interior floor, a base floor here. You need to be able to have a window texture, create some window texture-y thing. And this is also a a fireplace. So you're going to texture all of this to the best of your ability using Probuilder, not Maya or something else. And that's when I go in here, we'll be able to tell because we'll take the material, we'll open up the UV editor, and all the UVs are laid out really well, which is nice. This is another thing that you have to do as a 3D modeler, is lay the UVs out so they coordinate. But don't use the original textures. I want you to create your own textures, or bring in your own textures and materials and apply this. And get creative. There's a lot of stuff out there. Feel free to bring in whatever you want. Maybe it's a color scheme, but theme your house to something interesting and different. For extra kudos points. But yeah, so you could grab all this, materialize it. Once you're done with that, I have one more challenge. I want you to create a new barrel using Probuilder. And to do that, you just go New Shape, Cylinder. We'll bring this over here. And I have given you a explosive barrel texture. I would like you to texture the explosive barrel onto a barrel of your creation. So here we are, we're creating a barrel. It's just a cylinder. Build. Amazing. Amazing detail, I know. And then, maybe if you're getting a little fancy, Control Grow Selection, fly down to the bottom here. Whoops, misclicked that. And then, I'm just going to scale it a little bit. Boop. Oh, whoops, I need a subdivision. I didn't forget to put that in. Let's see. Insert edge loop. Now I have a second loop. Back to faces, Alt Grow. Oops, not open the game bar, Josh. There you go. Now you've got the top of a barrel. Alt Grow. Now you got the top and bottom. So you have your explosive barrel texture. I want you to create a barrel. I want you to texture this barrel. Use Probuilder, don't use the standard one. So texture this barrel, put it outside the house, and texture the house. All right. So let's talk about materials versus modeling, right? When do you want to use materials? When do you want to use modeling? Well, it just depends on your runtime. And it depends on what you want to do. So, for instance, Valve is notorious for having really, really, really low poly backgrounds, but really strong textures. And what they do is they pour all of the all the polygons that they save from the environments, and they pour them into the character sets. But specifically, they're trying to keep it really low poly, low poly-ish, so that it runs on more platforms, right? Because it doesn't just run, it runs on Xbox 360 like Team Fortress does, runs on a lot of different things. So they wanted to stay as low as possible on the poly count and spend it on what's really valuable. Now, other games like, Persona or whatever, they have tons of environmental textures and details, and it's a very different theme than that. And you can kind of tell the difference, right? The shininess and quality of the visuals tend to change. So it depends on what it is that you need, what it is that you want to do with your project, and that's really where it's at. There's a lot of open resources out there as well, and or you can create your own. One of the best ways to create a visually striking game that is always unique and consistent is to create your own look. I'm going to give you an example. I have a friend of mine, a colleague from college. His name is Zach Barth. He went on to make a lot of games. But in the first game he made, or not first, but one of the first games he made was Infiniminer. And I'm going to show you Infiniminer. And there it is. Looks pretty similar, right? To something else you might have seen. Let's watch some footage gameplay. And this game was a game that Zach Barth designed all by himself. And he also did all the textures and artwork. And Zach is self-proclaimed a bad artist. He feels like he doesn't really have a good art style or sense. So what he did was he took it was a voxel-based system. And he took this game and he decided each voxel he would just apply like a kind of low-res texture, right? So if you haven't figured it out yet, this was the basis for which Minecraft began. And this game was a little different, but as you can see, there's voxel-based, water, lava. There's a lot of that kind of stuff. There's building and that kind of thing. Minecraft is different, but this was the original game before Minecraft. And in fact, Notch, in some of the earliest interviews that he did, usually credited this game and Dwarf Fortress as his inspirations. So Infiniminer had a really specific look, and it really matched, and it did a good job to very quickly explain the visuals. So just because you're not an artist doesn't mean you don't want to know these things as well, but use what it is that you want to use and make it look consistent, and it'll probably look good, even if it's just your own personal style. So with that, I will see you in class.